All right, we are back on the podcast, getting ready for the 2024-25 college basketball season. Very interesting year coming up in college hoops. Very excited to have with us today a great guest. He covers the sport for Sports Illustrated. Kevin Sweeney is here with us today. Kevin, how are you?
What's going on, man? Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, appreciate having on here. And obviously, we've had a interesting sort of run here at the sport here. So, what are you looking forward to this coming season? What are some of the big headlines you're watching?
I think there's more star power than there's been in a long time, right? I think obviously the sport is traditionally kind of defined by coaches more than players, and that's been accentuated by the fact that so many big retirements. Obviously, Coach K and Jay Wright, Roy Williams. I think that's also happened at a time when there hasn't been a lot of NBA star power coming through college basketball, and I think that's sort of added to the marginalization that the sport sometimes gets in kind of November through February. So. I think that changes this year. Obviously, with Cooper, Cooper Flag at Duke will be a guy that I think has kind of mainstream appeal, but also Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey at Rutgers and VJ Edgecombe at Baylor. Those guys are all kind of top five level prospects in the draft. And then more returning All-Americans, guys like Janai Broome, Mark Sears, RJ Davis, more of those this year than in 2 decades. Five returning APL Americans. So I think that to me is the biggest story. There's, so much talk about NIL and does it hurt the sport? And yeah, I think there are some pretty substantial negative effects, but the one thing it has done is kept guys in school longer, and that's allowed us to have a little bit more recognizable names back with their teams this year.
Yeah, that's for sure here. I think one thing I think that has got a little underreported in my opinion, based on like obviously you see it more in the football sphere, but the expanded conferences, especially now you got the 18 team Big Ten, you got the supersized pack like Big 12 and the SEC. And it makes you wonder like how is it going to impact the season and the tournament? Because like we used to joke about like, oh, like the Big Ten getting like 10 teams, it seems outlandish. Now, might you see one of these big leagues get like 12 teams, 13 teams? I feel like anything is possible now with this wild world we have.
Yeah, 100%. I think you're already seeing with football some of the kind of weird ramifications, possibilities of three different teams going undefeated, and all of a sudden your conference championship game, how does that get sorted out? I think it'll be different with basketball, but yeah, the downwind effects will be fascinating, right? Is there more parity because of more travel? Do teams just kind of protect home court and that's that? I think the Big Ten, especially, you'll see a lot of that, and that's not just travel. I think that's the rosters are all pretty even. Like right now, I have to pull this. I looked the other day at it. Right now on Ken Palm, the difference between the projected second place team and the predicted 16th place team is 2 games. They have the second place team going 11-9, and the 16th place team being in a tie at 9-11. Right. That is the illustration of how tight these margins are going to be. So yeah, it'll be a different look, and as you said, it could lead to some either boosted bid totals, right? And all of a sudden the Big Ten is getting 13 teams in the field, or teams that otherwise might have made it, falling short because their resume just isn't that strong. Everybody kind of beats each other up, and maybe bids go to teams maybe trickling down to the Mountain West and the A10 who've had some success here lately.
Yeah, it's for sure here. And obviously, we're sitting in a sport. We have a repeat national champion with UConn here. We had some departures as well as expected. They do bring back a couple of key pieces. They got some recruits here. Dan Hurley obviously has the goal, turns down the Lakers to try and go for the three-peat here. Is it realistic to expect a UConn three-peat possibility here? Or you think this is the year they finally get picked off in March?
I think it's realistic that they'll be in the conversation. I think putting the expectation that they'll three-peat is tough. But again, what they accomplished last year is unbelievable, right? I mean, it is so hard in this day and age to remain elite when you lose the amount that they lost. And that was Sonogo and Hawkins and Andre Jackson, like huge pieces of that team that departed. And I think the thing that always struck me with last year's group was they got better as the year went on, right? That team was really good when I saw them in November, but they were a different level by March. And I think that's the Hurley effect as much as anything. So right now, when I watch their kind of exhibitions and stuff on film, I'm not like, man, that team is going to blow everyone away. But I didn't feel that way about them last year at this time, and they just continue to build. I think with The amount of shooting they have, obviously the coaching and the positions they put their guys in offensively to have success. Like I think they're going to be right in the conversation. Question for me is just, do they defend quite at the same level without clinging down low, right? He was so impactful protecting the rim, and I think that will be the adjustment for them is can they suffocate teams when they're not making threes the way they have the last couple of years.
Yeah, that's for sure here. And you mentioned him earlier. I want to touch back on Cooper Flag with Duke here. And obviously, like we've had these runs of like great freshmen come in, but I don't think we've had like a headline capturing freshman since Zion, the level of Cooper Flag seems to be doing at Duke here. Is it possible he can live up to the hype here? Because I feel like we already have a bunch of NBA teams just saying that we're not going to try to get maximize our ping pong balls chance Cooper Flag here. Like, do you think the hype is real with him? Can he be like a headline grabbing collegiate player?
I think he will be. I do think he's not going to score quite at the level that a Zion did, or maybe some other kind of quote unquote elite recruits. Um, I think it does when you watch him, it takes the appreciation for the full game, right? His ability to rebound, his ability to defend. He's a high level passer. The comp I use a lot with him is I think he's a more skilled Draymond Green, right? Like defensively, he does a lot of what Draymond did, but offensively, I think he continued to expand. He could shoot the ball better than Draymond does. He can handle the ball and pass. Like he's, you know, maybe not someone I see averaging 18 points a game, especially on this Duke team, which is loaded with talent. And another freshman, Con Knippel, is getting a ton of attention from NBA people, and he seems to be a guy that maybe a lot of people didn't circle in over the summer that all of a sudden now has a chance to be one of their best players. So they're going to spread the wealth, but I think he could be, 14, 15 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 blocks. Just again, the ability to take over the game without scoring, I think is something that you'll see with Cooper really from the jump.
Yes, for sure. And another interesting pair here is like the fact that we have two top five recruits at Rutgers is wild with Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper here. And Steve Pikiell's done a good job building the program as he got there. Now they're kind of, mid-tier Big Ten, which they were not when he got there. The expectations obviously through the roof now with those two guys there. Like, is this like potentially the best for the best season in Rutgers history if they can get the most out of these two guys in the supporting cast?
Yeah, the ceiling with those two is tremendous, right? I mean, those two guys are, they're not just 5 stars, right? They're top 5 NBA draft pick level guys. I went to practice in September, and when you watch Ace Bailey, you see the young Kevin Durant, young Paul George, young Brandon Miller, like that 6'9", stringy, athletic, offensively gifted. Like those guys don't come around often. And then Dylan at 6'6", chiseled 215 pounds, can play point guard, can play off the ball. Like you don't get those guys anywhere in college basketball together often, let alone at Rutgers. So yeah, the expectations are high for a reason. And I think a lot of their ceiling is kind of dictated by the other guys and how, the role players that Pikiell puts around them, how those guys fare. It is not like a particularly talented roster beyond Dylan and Ace. It's not bad by any means, but it's kind of its collection of mid-major transfers and whatnot. And how do those guys all fit in? I think there's a lot of concerns about 3-point shooting. Do they put enough spacing around Dylan and Ace? And again, just you're relying on two 18-year-olds in an era when the teams you're playing are putting 22, 23, 24-year-olds on the floor. That's a concern. But the ceiling, again, like if it hits, this could be a really special year in Piscataway.
Yeah, for sure. I also want to take a stay in the local angle a bit with St. John's because obviously, like anybody who watched last year towards the end of the season, like you can make the argument that the team that gave UConn the biggest test in March was St. John's, the Big East tournament. They end up getting snubbed. They don't do the NIT. We see that obviously this is a Patino situation where like he's adapted to the new world. A lot of guys out, new guys in. Like, what do you think year two looks like for Patino at St. John's?
Yeah, I think they'll level up. I think, so much talk about the guys coming and going, but to me, the guys that stayed are probably worth circling more. RJ Luis, who was a key rotation player a year ago, he looks like he's made a step, versatile athletic wing. And then Zabi Ejiofor, who played behind Joel Soriano last year at the 5, he has really improved and reports out of their practices have been really positive with him. So I think Patino is still one of the best player developers in the sport, maybe the best. And to have those two guys back is big. Have Simeon Wilcher back is big, and then you complement them with the portal guys they got. Point guards and Kadari Richmond and Davion Smith, both guys who've done it at a high level. Smith at Utah, and obviously Kadari at Seton Hall, which certainly made a splash when he made that crosstown flip. But yeah, look, I think they're going to be really good. I think they'll be a top 25 team. Another team you're a little concerned about the shooting and the spacing. The roster was constructed with a lot of guys who are, not high level 3-point shooters. They can all make a shot, but none of them are guys. There are a lot of guys you're going to live with taking perimeter jump shots, and so to me that'll be the question. But I think this group has a chance to be flat out elite on the defensive end because of their positional size, athleticism, and then obviously the system that Patino plays and how they pressure you.
Yeah, that's for sure. Sticking the Big East also at Seton Hall because unlike St. John's last year, their guys say, no, we're going to play the NIT, want the experience again. We got snubbed in the NCAAs. They go out and win the whole thing. Now, is this a platform you look here where Shaheen Holloway's in his third year there? He's been building us, so he should have made the tournament last year. Does Seton Hall get in the dance this year, do you feel like?
Man, I mean, I think it's going to be hard. I think if they do, it's Shaheen's best coaching job just because of what they lost, right? Kadari, Dre Davis, you got on the list. I mean, this is a total restart roster wise, and they had to do that restart with less resources than a lot of their peers, right? I don't think it's a secret that their NIL situation is not as good as the majority of the Big East, the majority of really high major basketball. They're working on it. The hope is that they can get to a point where it's a more level playing field, but they've had to kind of moneyball some of these spots, and I think Shaw did a good job with some of these guys, guys they had relationships with, like Scotty Milton out of Ohio State, who they recruited in high school. I think they're going to have to develop Isaiah Coleman and get him better opportunity for him in the second year to take a step forward. So right now I have them as an NIT team. I certainly won't bet against them. I think they'll be a lot better in January than they are now. But early on, how consistently can they score the basketball, I think will be a concern. And, we've seen that for them the last couple of years, just, slower non-conferences last year, had those losses to USC and Iowa, and then lost the Rutgers game. And they spent really the next 2 months trying to climb out of that hole. And I just worry you're going to be in a similar spot again in 24-25.
Yeah, that's for sure. And obviously, this is interesting area here where you see these big super conferences. Big East got disrespect last year. All our teams did well. Like, which conferences you watching the most? You say, okay, these are the leagues I feel like are going to produce the best basketball this year.
I think the Big 12 has earned that reputation, and the numbers have pretty strongly given them the nod. I believe 8 of the last 10 years. And then this year, 5 of the top 10 in the preseason AP poll are from the Big 12. I think 8 of the top 25 at Ken Palm are from that league. The top in that league is incredible. I think the SEC has done an incredible job with player acquisition. The NIL situations throughout that league are really good, and that's allowed for some really dynamic rosters. You see it obviously at the top with Alabama, but I think really working your way down, there's a reason they have, I think, 9 top 25 teams in the preseason poll. Now, I know Big East fans, and I know Jan Hurley's been very vocal about this. Like, hey, we win the national championships. Like, why are we not given the same level of respect? And I do think the top of the Big East in UConn and really Creighton and Marquette the last couple of years have belonged right in that conversation. Question is, can the middle and bottom keep up? And there's a lot that comes into that. Um, it's not just the analytics, and I do think that eye test wise, some of those teams have been right there with the middle of the middle of the Big 12, middle of the SEC. But like it's an important non-conference for the Xaviers and the Providences of the world. St. John's would, I think, probably belong in that category. Villanova certainly. Important non-conference to prove this league's strength going into league play, to hopefully turn things around from a bids perspective from where they were a year ago.
Yeah, I suppose you didn't mention the Big Ten. It's interesting because this is a league that sends a lot of teams traditionally. It's like a down year. Obviously, Purdue loses Edie. Some of the big boys have not been doing as well. Like, let's look at, I believe, 4 teams in the top 25 preseason poll, led by Purdue at 14. So it feels like this, despite the gains that they had in terms of teams, I feel like the league is in a down cycle.
Yeah, look, I think there's probably not an elite team in the Big Ten this year, right? Purdue kind of carried that, and I thought Illinois by the end of the year was certainly in that conversation. I'm not sure on paper there's one team in the Big Ten that I circle and say, I love that group to be a Final Four team. I think there's a ton that I love is like tournament level. There's just so little separation, right? Like I mentioned earlier that the difference between 2 and 16, right? Here's another illustration. From 30 to 40 in Ken Palm's rankings, there are 6 Big Ten teams,
Wow.
right? Like they might just dominate the bubble. And then again, the question will be how many of those teams can get in? Does 10 and 10 for everybody get everybody in? That'll be the question. I do think the highest ceiling in that league is Illinois. They added 2 potential lottery picks in Kasparas Jakashunas from Lithuania, Will Riley, a freshman from Canada. Those 2 guys are studs, and then around them have added a ton of positional size and shooting, which is really the recipe in 24-25, right? It's kind of the Alabama model with skill and a great system. I think Brad Underwood started to get there, and wouldn't be surprised if they take a big step this year. But yeah, I think down is probably fair to describe it, but I do think there will be a lot of teams that are really competitive. The question is, can someone really elevate above the fray?
Yeah, that's for sure here. And obviously, we have a general idea who our big teams are. Like, do you have any sleepers to keep your eye on? You feel like are not getting enough hype right now? Could really be factors later in the season, hit February and March.
Man, that's a good question. I did mention Illinois. I think they're a team that maybe has been overlooked a little bit. I think Texas Tech is going to be really, really good. Huge believer in Grant McCasland, comes from that Scott Drew coaching tree and had a good year one. They bring a lot back and then went in the portal and got JT Toppin from New Mexico, who should be one of the better bigs in the country. I think they're a team, so much hype about that top five in the Big 12. To me, they're the number six, and that number six team would be a number one, two, or three in a lot of other conferences. So, big fan of them. And then, obviously you can work your way down. There's a lot of, like, I think there's more parity throughout the landscape. I know we mentioned it with the Big Ten. I think there's the separation right now between 1 and 50 nationally is not what it has been in the last several years. It's going to make for a really fun, really unpredictable regular season.
Yeah, that's for sure. And I honestly want to touch on the mids as well because I'm a small school guy and like I don't really count Gonzaga anymore because they've proven they're not a mid major and they're going to the Pac-12, whatever form this takes in a couple of years. So, who are your mid majors you keeping an eye on here? Somebody who could be interesting in the regular season.
Yeah, I think, I would circle Princeton as one to watch. I wrote a story with them on Sports Illustrated. It's out this week. In an era where it's so hard to keep your talent, they kept Xavier Lee and Caden Pierce. Pierce, the only one bid league player of the year last year to be back at his school out of the 22 one bid conferences, which is absurd. But those 2 guys give that group a chance to have a really special year. Bradley in the Missouri Valley, obviously a league that produces lots of really good teams every year. I think Bradley's the favorite there. The A10 should be incredibly competitive. Excited about VCU at the top, but St. Louis with Robbie Avila and Josh Schertz coming over from Indiana State, Loyola with their defense. Dayton's always competitive. St. Joe's has a ton of talent, maybe the most talent in the league. And we'll see if the Mountain West can build on what they did a year ago, right? I mean, obviously, 6 bids. Not sure that's happening again, but can they get 3 or 4? I think absolutely. And Boise will be in that conversation. New Mexico, Colorado State, San Diego State, always in that convo. And then trying to think of any other else. Yeah, McNeese and Grand Canyon would be McNeese, Grand Canyon, and High Point are really the 3 one bid league teams that you're probably most confident will win their own leagues. They're all talent wise and resource wise well above the rest of their conference, and I think have an opportunity to stack some wins, be in that kind of 28 to 30 win range, and be dangerous 12 seeds. Question is, can they elevate beyond that and be in the at-large conversation? I think it's probably too early to tell, but the margins are certainly tight.
Yeah, I got 2 more questions here. Number one, obviously, like everybody cares about the Final Four, the tournament. Like, I know it's too early to name a Final Four, but like, how many teams do you feel like are Final Four caliber? Like, how many would you put in that contender bucket?
That's a good question. Like I said, I do think it's hard because of I think the margins are tighter. Look, I think probably around 14 or 15 in my national rankings is where I start to say, okay, there's a bit of a drop off here. I have Texas Tech 15th nationally. To me, they would probably be around that kind of dividing line where it's like I not just, oh, I like this team. They have, a couple of question marks. Like that's the group where I'm like, I love this team. I think they have all the makings on paper of being a Final Four type group. But again, I think there's plenty that can emerge as the year goes on. I mean, I don't have Arkansas in that group right now. They just bludgeoned Kansas in an exhibition. Exhibitions aren't everything, but so there's some positive signs from teams like Arkansas and Kentucky that have huge roster turnover, new coaches, the whole nine, and what will they look like? Still a lot to learn about so many of these teams before conference play, and we're just getting going here. But yeah, I think it's wide open, and don't think there's a clear number one. Don't think there's a clear top tier necessarily as there's been in years past.
Yeah, for sure. And the last thing I want to just go over here real quick is obviously like you're familiar with the sport. I'm covering the sport a lot. We know that like the casual fans don't really pay attention until after the NFL season's over, where you're showing up in mid-February, you miss all the good stuff in non-conference. They have a lot of great games between top teams and in non-league play. Like, what are you looking forward to in the November, December basketball here in the non-con? What are some of the games that you were making a point to check out?
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna be a lot of fun. We're gonna get Alabama, Houston, and Duke, Kansas the same day in Las Vegas, the week of Thanksgiving. It's the same time as the Maui Invitational's running and Battle for Atlantis. Like that week is always good, but I think this year has even more just incredible matchups. So I'd circle those two for sure. Purdue, Alabama. I'll be there at Mackey. I love when we can get these high level games early in the season on campuses. It's so important to me. Like the student sections. It's all the pageantry. That's part of college basketball. And playing in an NBA arena with half empty crowds isn't the same. So Alabama, Purdue at Mackey is one. North Carolina going to Kansas the first week of the season is one. That's a good example of a game that'll be on campus. Duke and Auburn play each other at Cameron. I think Duke goes to Arizona. That's another one. So look, I think just again that aspect of college basketball is so special, and we have a lot of them in November and December, certainly before we get into league play when it's every night. And I would certainly try to get your eyes on as many of those as possible because it should be a ton of fun to watch.
Yeah, I know it's not an on-campus game. I've also give a shout out to the local people here. Watch my Zoom background, MSG behind me. You got Gonzaga, UConn here in December. That's gonna be a lot of fun also.
Yeah, certainly. And maybe not a on-campus atmosphere, but I've been to a UConn game at the Garden. I know a lot of folks have, and it's a different experience, right? It's the fans are passionate, they're into it. It's not your typical kind of stale NBA environment. So definitely circle that. It should be a great game and a huge matchup between two, I think, title level teams.
All right, Kevin. Thanks for all the time. Really appreciate it. People want to follow you on social media. Give out some of your college basketball coverage for SI. How can they do that?
Yeah, at on Twitter at CBB_Central. Check out the all of our work at Sports Illustrated SI.com, and then also with the Field 68 helping with their After Dark show every night 11 Eastern on their YouTube channel. It's a lot of fun. Some of the best kind of personalities, names in college basketball, a ton of access. It's a great time. So appreciate you having me.